Hello, everybody. I hope you're doing fabulously well. While I work on new episodes, I wanted to change things up and share this conversation I had with Mariann and Jasmin at Our Hen House. I know they need no introduction, but Jasmin Singer and Mariann Sullivan are the powerhouse duo behind Our Hen House, a nonprofit organization whose mission it is to mainstream the movement to end the exploitation of animals and provide support for those working to change the world for animals. Jasmin is an author and speaker. She's known for her work at the intersection of animal rights, identity, and social justice. Mariann is an animal law professor, and she brings deep insight into the legal and ethical dimensions of animal protection. Together, they co-host the award-winning Our Hen House podcast. I am thrilled to share this conversation with you. They are longtime colleagues, and Jasmin has been a friend for many years. We go way back. She actually attended my my husband and our 10-year vow renewal back in 2011, which is so long ago now. And that's when she met my mother, which she references in our conversation. But we met long before that, connecting right away over language and animal advocacy and New Jersey, which is where we're both from. In fact, we're both from the same town. We just have a bit of a gap, maybe 10-year gap in between. But I loved chatting with them. And I hope I answered the question Jasmin asked me about my mother and the dedication of my book, A Year of Compassion. I hope I answered eloquently enough. I'm not sure that I did. I may have to listen to it again myself. I don't like listening to my own interviews, so you'll just have to let me know. I hope you enjoy the conversations. Don't forget to follow our Hen House podcast, as well as Food for Thought podcast. And for lots more inspiration and information for living compassionately, you can subscribe to my Substack. You can pick up your copy of A Year of Compassion. And of course, you can check out my upcoming trips, all of which can be found at joyfulvegan.com. Now, I hope you enjoy our conversation.
Welcome to our hen house, Colleen.
Welcome to my house.
Yeah, I love that I'm seeing behind you. Are you still in that adorable house in Oakland?
No, we're in a different house. We've been here for 13 years now.
Oh, wow.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
We're way out of date.
But where? Where is it?
It's in Oakland. It's a
okay.
different part. I actually just wrote an article yesterday for my Substack telling the story about an oak tree and resilience. And I kind of tell the story about this neighborhood and this house. It's a really special house. It's a really special spot. We are 100 feet up from the street, so we get to just have privacy and trees and nature. So yeah, you have to come see it. It's very different than the old house.
I would love to.
We'll all be there.
Yeah.
I think we can get there by tomorrow morning.
Sure. But you must have very strong calf muscles because you must have those stairs that go all the way up, right?
We have stairs and switchbacks.
Okay. Wow. That's so cool.
Yeah.
I love that. I feel like one of my first trips to the Bay Area was when I realized how out of shape I was, because it's just like all hills and it's so beautiful. Well, listen, congratulations. Speaking of beautiful, your new book, A Year of Compassion, which I'm holding in front of me right now, 52 weeks of living zero waste, plant-based and cruelty-free. It's really a lovely, lovely book. And I have so many questions about it because it feels very different from your other books. And what number book is this? You've written so many at this point.
This is number 8.
Wow.
Wow.
How are you feeling? Does your stomach hurt from the birthing process?
Yeah, exactly. I think I look pretty good for 8 babies.
You look amazing. Wow, 8 babies.
8 births. Yeah, I feel great. I'm so proud of this book. I love this book. And it is a reflection of my own journey. I have things to learn and I'm growing and there are things that I'm always trying to do better. And this is a reflection of that. And my hope is that it inspires others to get excited about so many different ways we can make a difference and have an impact.
You have been advocating for animals and for compassionate eating for so long. When did your podcast start? Like 1988 or something?
2004.
Wow. That's bananas. That's totally bananas and so cool. I mean, you are really iconic for so many people, including us. Tell us a little bit about how your message has shifted and also how it's maintained its through line as expressed in the new book.
Thank you for that. That's a really good question. I think because I've always been really clear that compassion was the through line and the foundation, it's very easy to pivot to different manifestations of that. And so it's no different, right? I mean, I might be talking more about, maybe wildlife, maybe sustainability, maybe, zero waste, decluttering, like these kinds of things, but it's all connected. It's all connected to the same principle, which is what I do impacts someone or something else, period, full stop. And I want to make that impact be as positive as possible. So it's just the natural progression. How has it changed? I don't think it's changed. I think it's deepened. I think it just keeps widening the circle of compassion. And again, it just makes it really easy because it's always been really clear to me that if we understand that we are interconnected with each other, with everything, everyone, everybody in the universe, then we make decisions and we make choices that are going to have the least, negative impact. So yeah, I'm really proud. And I really been wanting to write a book on compassion. And I have more to say about compassion because I think it's a really misunderstood concept. And I was really happy to get this in now. And I think it's a really important time for people to really kind of, just understand what it means and understand how we can express it more.
Yeah, I really want to get into that, the definition of compassion and how important that word is to you. But I actually have a question I wanted to ask right up at the beginning. And it does allude to the fact that, like, this is quite a moment to have a book come out. Like, the world feels very crazy. People are very, very anxious. Things just seem very fraught. I think particularly in the US at the moment, but, all over the world, I'm sure. And so can you just talk about how you feel this book meets this moment? And are you glad that it's coming out now? Or do you think it's unfortunate? Like, how do you put these two things together? And, I can see an argument for why this is a perfect moment for this book.
Yeah, I mean, when I wrote it, it was a perfect moment, and it's a perfect moment now. I don't think there's ever a time when we don't need more compassion. You've heard me probably even say, the problems we have in this world are not because we have so much compassion, we don't know what to do with it. The problems we have in this world are because we're not living according to our own values of compassion and kindness. And it is a call for living according to your own values, not my values, but your values. Not yours, Mariann's, but our own.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah. Everyone should live according to my values. I like that theme. Is that in the book?
Exactly.
Yeah, there's a chapter devoted to that.
Exactly.
I've always said, just put me in charge, folks. Just put me in charge. You will like the way the world comes out. And, they just never do. I guess Trump said the same thing and they actually did it. So.
We didn't get very long before mentioning.
It is kind of the reason for the fraught moment. I mean, I don't see how you ignore it right now.
Sure. I think you're right. You're absolutely right.
But it is a moment to be talking about compassion.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. And I want to understand a little bit more about what you mean, Colleen, when you say that compassion you think is sort of misunderstood. It's a word that obviously resonates with you. So how do you define it?
Well, let me go back to a little bit of what Mariann asked also about, the timing now.
Yeah.
And it's all connected, right? It's all related. So I remember having a marketing meeting. I mean, I've been writing about these same principles for years, and now it's all together in one place. But I remember having a marketing meeting with the publishing team, the marketing team. I just remember them feeling so, this was 4 months ago, 5 months ago, feeling so just full of despair and hopelessness. And I come in, with this excitement around this book. And by the end of the conversation with them, they all felt like they had pivoted toward, yes, this is the book we need because this is the book about hope, because this is the book that says, regardless of how you're feeling or, if you are feeling despair, which I think a lot of people are, and anxiety, as you said, there's a part of me that always says, I just don't have time for that. I don't have time for it. And even, kind of me making the joke about naming Trump, I don't name him a lot because I don't want to put energy or oxygen over to a place that I don't want to thrive. And so what I do is put all of the energy and oxygen into the things that I want to flourish. And that is the story of, I don't have time to be distressed. There's not enough hours in the day for me to focus on the things that I know are having a positive impact. So I don't say that to dismiss the anxiety that people feel.
I say it to empower you to look down at your feet and look around you and see all the possibilities and the opportunities to make a difference. So as far as compassion, it's kind of related to this, right? The reason I say it's misunderstood is because whenever I write about compassion, and especially having compassion for people we don't agree with or for people we think aren't compassionate, I get more flack for that than anything else I ever say. Anything I say. Because the presumption is if you are asking to demonstrate compassion for someone who lacks compassion or is violent or is cruel or is all the things, the implication is that you're condoning that behavior. And it's such a mistake. And so what I often hear people say is, yeah, I'm compassionate, but I'm not compassionate for them. They don't deserve my compassion. And that's the stuff that makes me go, oh, you really wonder why this world isn't as compassionate as we want it to be? Literally withholding compassion. And so it doesn't matter who the recipient is. The question isn't, are they compassionate and thus deserving of my compassion? The question is, am I capable of demonstrating compassion for everyone, regardless of who they are? That's what compassion is. And I think it's misunderstood for that reason. And I think it's misunderstood because I think it's not very secularized. I still think that it is a term, a concept that still really rests in religion, and Eastern religion as well as Western religion, both. I mean, if you just go search, for books on compassion, you will find most of them are kind of steeped in spirituality and religion. And nothing wrong with that, because that's part of our human story. But I want to kind of secularize it. I want to bring it into the secular and normalize it in a way that I think we have a long way to go before that happens.
I have to tell you, first of all, when I think of the word compassion as it relates to veganism and, animal advocacy, I think of you when I think of it positively. Like, I just think she's the only one who I feel like has been able to add it to her brand. And I'm sorry for using that word because it sounds too marketing, jargony, but for lack of a better word, you have Colleen Patrick-Goudreau compassion. For so long, that's been part of who you are, not only in your work, but like in the way you show up in the world. That as the exception, I have found that there are a few words, and I know you're a language maven, but there are a few words that I feel like have completely lost their meaning in for lack of a better word here too, the mainstream. And compassion has been one of them. I feel like it's like, or blessed, like hashtag blessed, hashtag compassion, hashtag this, like things that are just those words that ChatGPT will tell you to like add a hashtag to when you're posting your Instagram. To me, if you look at the word, it's lost its meaning because it's so watered down, with you genuinely being an exception to that. So can you just talk a little bit about that? And since you are a language maven, just talk about the importance of like tone and language, compassion and other words as well, in how you frame your advocacy and how you've used those techniques to tell your story successfully. Like, why are you the only exception I think of when I think of the word compassion being almost just meaningless?
Gosh, well, thank you. I mean, I don't know, I guess we need to look a little harder because I'm sure there are plenty of exceptions. I mean, language is limited, language is difficult, it's finite, like it's really hard. And even that word, it's used interchangeably, I think, with words like kindness, with altruism, sometimes with empathy or sympathy, maybe philanthropy, right? And they all mean something very different. And when it comes down to like me talking about these topics, like it's not kindness, it's different than that. It's not altruism, it's different than that. I think it's an incredibly profound word. I think it's incredibly profound. And it's funny because in the introduction of the book, I say something like, if I could whittle down what compassion means to one word, and of course there is already the word, it's compassion. Right. So I said one other word, it maybe connection is what I think I said, this interconnectedness. I think interconnectedness is even better. I need to rewrite that sentence. Interconnectedness, right? Because that's what it is, as I said early on. But it's also about action. That's the difference between having empathy for someone. That doesn't mean you take any action from that. And altruism is different because you can do something that's altruistic that helps someone else that doesn't necessarily have to be accompanied by compassion. Like it doesn't have to have like a lot of emotional weight to it to actually, write a check to an organization that you want to support, right? That's, philanthropy, that's altruism. In the end, it does ultimately help. But compassion is more profound because with the action also comes that connectedness, and that empathy and compassion really mean the same thing in that you literally are feeling someone else's suffering. You're feeling someone else's pain and you want to end it. That's what the real difference is. So, yeah, I mean, that's what I think about. And I think the reason I try to carry this into my, my work, my life in every way. And the way I do that is because I actually believe that we are all compassionate, that we all gravitate toward that. It just gets, there's a lot of muck. There's a lot of muck that covers it up. I mean, it's why I've said, and I mean this, that I didn't become vegan. I didn't become vegan. I didn't become anything. Rather, I removed the blocks to the compassion that was inside of me. And I think that's really important. This is why words are so hard, because it takes me, a sentence to say what I really want to say, which is vegan for me is just the expression of removing all of the barriers, all of the blocks to the compassion that was already inside of me that I believe is in everybody. And that's what it means for me to be vegan. It really is, it is compassion.
Okay, that was beautiful. And something you said made me start to think about empathy. And I just want to nerd out on words for just another second, if you will indulge me. Can you just tell me in Colleen language and Colleen framing how empathy relates to compassion?
So empathy relates to compassion in that it's kind of the prerequisite. You need to feel the feelings that somebody else is feeling. Like that's kind of the prerequisite. And then feeling that, really resonating emotionally in that way, you're then compelled to want to end the suffering that they are feeling.
Okay. Thank you. Love that. I'm going to re-listen to that part of the podcast a few times.
I have another word I want to unpack a little here. And that, I mean, it's another word that people really associate with you for very obvious reasons. You've always used it, and that's joyful. And I'm just wondering, that's not the word you're using for this book, which is fine because you don't want to name all of your books the same thing. That would be weird. But you've always helped people to understand that caring about animals, caring about the natural world is totally not a sacrifice. It's a really good way to live. It's like a route to happiness. So how would you say this book takes that message and extends it further?
Because it feels so good. I mean, if we feel distressed because we feel that we don't have power, then it is so incredibly joyful to claim our power. And this book is about claiming our power. It is about saying here, and I purposely chose 52, I chose the things very specifically, which ones have the most impact, because I also, there are a million things we can do out there to help and to make it a positive impact and to be joyful. But I wanted to kind of choose those that are going to be the most impactful, right? Mm-hmm. So how can you not feel joyful that there are actually answers to our question, how can I help? What can I do? There are answers. So that just brings me a lot of joy, and I feel empowered and I feel effective. And that's, how can I not feel joyful when I have the ability to do something?
I don't want to paint me and Mariann as overly dour.
I'm fine if you paint me as overly dour myself.
I feel right now
proud of it,
that I feel like we're hardwired a little differently. Actually, funny little aside, and it might have been someone.
And I think it's doer.
Yes, you're right. I'm sorry, doer. You're like, Colleen Patrick-Goudreau is here. Say it correct. I might have been someone here in the flock. I'm not sure, but I was recently interviewed by another podcast, and a listener emailed me afterwards, and they were like, I had no idea that you also had these sort of grim perspectives, because you're always having to be the counter to Mariann, who is like the most grim. So
I have visited upon you the burden of cheerfulness.
Yes, no, it's true. I am not I do take SSRIs. I exist like so many other people do in this difficult world. I'm incredibly privileged, all of the things. And I am very lucky and grateful to have come across animal rights so early in my journey so that it could become part of, the fabric of my being. That being said, I feel like we are hardwired differently, and I don't like that I say it that way because that makes it seem like that's just the way it is and that I have no control over changing that. And of course, I know that we can control our thoughts. I know that we have the ability to interact with the world differently. Colleen, what are your suggestions for dealing with the grief that inevitably comes with knowing the truth about what is happening to animals? And I want to say too, I know from following you for so long that you not only hold that, but you have had a lot of other shitty things happen. And yet you're still sitting here compassionate and joyful and like, how?
Okay, first of all, I want to say that I'm not always joyful, and I get angry, and I have all of the emotions that you have, that we all have. It's true. I hear what you're saying about the hardwiring, and I do think there's personality. I mean, you have to take that into account. Obviously, we all have a different way of orienting. Well, we all have a different kind of maybe our default perspective, right? I guess what I would say is I am oriented to that. I have always been oriented to joy, to solutions, but so are you. So you can still be oriented to solutions and maybe not feel the joy all the time, right? That's more cognitive. But I also really cultivate it. I really do practice it. And what that means is where I look, where I pay attention, the practices that I do. So I orient to joy and to hope, very consciously. Now, it's not as much of a lift for me that it might be for somebody else, but that lift gets easier as you cultivate. And so if one is interested in cultivating the orientation toward hope, you can do that. It just requires the practice and the unending practice. You don't get there and then you're like, okay, I'm done, that's done, and now I'm finished, and now I'm oriented that way. It's a constant cultivation. So for instance, one of the practices, and Diane Waltner is here, I know she knows, I've talked about this a lot. She's a supporter and a follower. Good to see you. So one of the things I've talked about for years is what works for me is the loving kindness meditation. And I'm not someone who like just does meditation, sitting and breathing and kind of doing that kind of meditation. The loving kindness meditation for me is incredibly powerful because again, it's very active. You're doing something. You're kind of picking who you want to be compassionate toward, or kind of send compassion to. But it's before you can start sending compassion to anybody else, you first start in the loving kindness meditation, sending it to yourself. So it starts with whatever mantra you want to use. May I be well, may I be happy, may I be healthy, may I, be joyful, right? Whatever. So you start there. And then when you start switching it to, then you think of someone you already know and love, because it's really easy to do that. And you're kind of checking in with yourself, because it's pretty easy to think of someone you love and think of them in front of you and go, may you be well, may you be healthy, may you be happy, may you find joy. So that feels pretty good. But you start with actually feeling it, and then you're sending what you have to them, right? So you have to cultivate what you have before you can start sending it out. And then you go to someone who's neutral, right? And kind of, how does that feel? Does it feel good? Do you get those warm, squishy feelings as when you sent it to the person you really love? And then you send it to someone who you have conflict with, you have difficulty with, you might not like, whatever. And you can feel the difference, right? You can feel the difference. So again, this goes back to like, it's what I'm bringing into the world. It's not what they're doing. It's what I'm bringing into the world and how I'm seeing the world and seeing the situation. So I do that, and I do that every day. And I actually really love it because I'm like, okay, who am I going to pick today? All right, who am I going to pick? Like both for the ones I love. And sometimes I'm like, I can't do that. I just did them yesterday, but I do them again. So that's one way that I cultivate compassion and joy. And it seems to be working, right? Another, and I'll do it like, if I'm in a public place, I'll just look at someone to kind of send them compassion, just kind of look at them while I'm standing there. May you be well, may you be happy, may you be healthy, right? It's just kind of cultivating it and orienting to it. And there was other practical things, like I don't stare at the things that are so bleak and depressing that would just make me actually feel despair rather than motivated. right? I want to be motivated. So it doesn't mean I don't look. It just means I don't stare. The other thing is I'm very clear about what's mine and what's not. You know, I know how I voted, and I know that there are things that are happening because elections have consequences. And I hate that they're happening, federal mandates that I can't control, right? But what I do know is that there are things I can control right here in my own backyard. I also do, I know this is going to sound, maybe my answer is too long and I can take a pause, but I shared this not that long ago. I shared this a couple times in my podcast as well. So one of the philosophies I follow is Stoicism. One of them is Taoism. And I love reading the Tao Te Ching. And there's a passage in the Tao that says, do you think you can improve the world? I don't think it can be done. The world is sacred. It can't be improved if you tamper with it. You'll ruin it. If you treat it like an object, you'll lose it. And every time because I think of it, I memorize it, I repeat it, I say it, I read it. And every time I go, no, that doesn't apply. I don't understand that. What do you mean I can't improve the world? I'm an activist. Like, that's what I do. I don't understand it. And I struggled with it for years and years and years. And I finally got it after years of just refusing to believe that just didn't apply to me. And what it means to me, at least is how I interpret it, is that the world is imperfect by nature. It just is imperfect. And it's one of the things Marcus Aurelius writes in his journal, Meditations, is he says, asking questions like, why is the world violent? Why is there cruelty? Why are people evil? Whatever. It's like asking why a fig tree produces figs. It just is. This is just what it looks like. And so when you orient to, it's imperfect, it's not going to ever be perfect, you can relax a little and go, all right, then what's my job here? What's my role here to just keep making this world as good a place as I can, even though it's never going to be perfect. So I find a lot of comfort in the imperfection of this world. And I just do my part to do what's right.
Well, that's it's inspiring to me to hear that. Thank you. It reminds me, and this is very personal, but it reminds me of being in an Al-Anon meeting, on the Upper West Side, like maybe 10 years ago or something, and someone was like, what you're saying sounds a lot like the Serenity Prayer, knowing what you have control over, knowing what you don't, and knowing what your role is in that. I remember hearing someone talking about how they had bought a dog and had to return the dog. And they were saying it in such a way that was like very sort of self-pitying, which is a very judgmental term, but whatever. And everyone was kind of giving them that. And I was sitting there like irate and going over the Serenity Prayer and then being like, but I'm an activist, but I'm in a 12-step program, but I'm an activist, and it was like just this like collision that I still struggle to understand. But I do want to talk about a page in your book that was very moving to me. And it is related, I think, to the story I just told, because when I'm really struggling in the world, the person I think of the most is the person who was the most important person in my life was my grandma, who's just, she's been gone for 12 years. Whenever I'm struggling, I just think like channel her, and I'm an atheist, so it's not in a like witchy way, and it's not in a religious way. It's more like who she is and what her legacy was and what she taught me, and that. I really loved your dedication to Mom. You started it. Like, it brought tears to my eyes. It still is. I had the chance to meet your mom, and she was like, first of all, she looked like Elaine Stritch, but she didn't have the same personality as Elaine Stritch at all.
Does she have the same voice?
That would be great. But she was wonderful. And I mean, I only met her for one day, and I want to know how she started it, because you said to Mom, you started it. So what did your mom instill in you that helped to lead to the perspective that you just so beautifully expressed?
Thank you for that, Jasmin. She died in 2020, and one of the things when she was in a nursing home, and she was in a nursing home when she died, and it was during COVID, and I couldn't go. So she died alone in a nursing home
Oh,
with
I'm so
someone
sorry.
with her, but it was really hard. And I used to have video calls with her even prior to COVID because I'm in California, she's in New Jersey, and I would visit her every few months in person, but I would have video calls with her that one of the attendants there helped me set up. They had never done video calls with anybody before, so that we were doing weekly like
Wow.
Zoom calls, and it was wonderful. And I had it on my calendar for 1:15 on Friday. It was every Friday. So just before we started, the calendar popped up because I've never removed it. I've never removed the calendar reminder.
Mm.
So, it's really interesting. This goes a bit to what we're saying about how we orient, that I am who I am because of my everything, my mother, my father, all of it, for better or for worse. And so, everything that my mother, whoever she was, and all the conflict we had for many, many years, continued to shape me for better or for worse, whether she was directly saying you should be compassionate. I mean, like that wasn't like the lesson, right? My mother didn't raise me just saying you should be compassionate. But in all the ways she was who she was, I was reacting to that, and I was modeling it, and I was rebelling against it. And I am who I am because of that, because of the things I didn't want to be that she was, and because of the things I wanted to be that she was. So in all those ways, so in the way that she started it, like because of her, I am who I am, not just because she birthed me, but because she shaped me. And she supported me. I was that kid who my mother, my father, my sister were not the ones who would cry if they saw a stray dog or a bird who fell from the ground. I was that person in the family, but my mother supported it to the best of her ability. She wasn't that supportive when I became vegetarian. She had her own, defensive reaction like so many of our family members do. But the very physical thing, I mean, I remember when we adopted our dog at the time, she was a little puppy, and I feel like I've told you the story before. My mother put her in like, a box for her first few nights because she was little and wanted to keep her, safe and confined. But it was like a refrigerator size box. Like it was like massive. So I remember in the middle of the night, she was whimpering and crying, and I was just beside myself, and I was crying, and I woke my mother up. And my mother, got up with me, and we took her out of the box, and we sat with her until I fell asleep and she fell asleep. I have never forgotten that. And, she was the reason I kept fighting to be more compassionate with someone who really challenged my ability to be compassionate, and that was my mom. We had a really, really rough time for many years. But because of the fact that we kept coming back to each other, and I would measure my self, I would say worth, by how I interacted with her whenever we would interact when it was really hard.
Wow.
And so I think I am more compassionate because of the struggles we had, as well as because she was supportive of my compassion. So it's a very long answer, but
No, it's beautiful.
No, it's really important to unpack those stories because while we all have different stories, they all ring some of the same bells, I think, especially mothers and daughters. This is kind of a more general question, but it relates to the story you just told because it's the fact is that I mean, you were the person in your family who cared about animals, but there are a lot of people who care about animals. There really are. People, I mean, we all know people who won't even look at a video because it upsets them so much. And more people actually know what's happening to animals. It's really not a secret anymore. So, what's your theory as to why people continue to eat animals? And kind of vis-a-vis that, like, how does that relate to your theory of change reaching? I mean, they're there. It's not everybody. There are the psychopaths out there. There are the people who just, their lives are too complicated to even think about this. But it really is not unusual for people to care. But it's very unusual for people to stop eating them.
yeah. So I do talk about those details in The Joyful Vegan, the book before this one, that was a victim of COVID. It came out in 2019 and everything got canceled after that. And I wish every vegan would read this book because it answers that question, or at least it's my answer to that question. And I talk about in the introduction of that book, the willful blindness that we choose. And it is a choice. We choose it, but it's built from all of the structures in our lives as we're developing. And, that example of me loving my dog, I was being fed and my mother supporting me. I was also eating animals. She was feeding me animals, right? And so it's literally the cognitive dissonance that says, I love animals and I don't want to hurt them. And I know if I eat them, I'm hurting them. We have to reconcile that somehow. And the way most of us reconcile it is through willful blindness and telling ourselves the stories we need to tell ourselves so that we can still believe that we're good people and still not change so much that it's going to be too inconvenient. And not just inconvenient, but completely against the status quo, completely against the cultural norms that we might be raised in, the religious norms we might be raised in, the personal values that there's so many things that are like literally building up around that compassion, right? That really innate, really intense compassion that I do think we have, and that I agree with you that, barring some psychopaths, most people have this compassion. And so what happens is we start to build up all of this plaque around that compassion so that we can keep doing what we're doing, but still believe we're good. And that's why we have to say things like, the animals were made for us, or they don't feel the same pain as we do, or what have you. We have to believe those things because otherwise the whole story would fall apart. And so literally when you're trying to reconcile this cognitive dissonance, the only two choices we have are to change our behavior or to change our thinking about our behavior. So most of us change our thinking about our behavior because it's easier. And the change that you talked about, I really do believe that most people who, like you said, who don't look because it's too painful, it's because they care. I mean, that actually is a demonstration that they are compassionate, right? That's an indication. But I think the reason people stop short of actually making the change is not because they're afraid of being vegan. It's because they don't know what it's going to look like on the other side of that change. And it's the change that I think really scares the bejesus out of people, because we are people who want to go along with the status quo. We want to go along with, who we've always been. We're known quantities. My interactions with my family, they're known quantities, the holidays, all the things, the meals, the favorite foods. You start to go, well, what if I make that change? You start to go, I have no idea how that's going to change my life, my relationships, and I don't even want to, I don't want to go there. So that's what I think, which also means that, when we're talking to people who seem like they're resisting, listen to what they're really saying. They're most likely, whatever excuses they're making, they're not avoiding the change because they're evil or because they don't care. They're avoiding it because they're afraid. There's something that is really fearful for them. And I think if we can tap into that as advocates when we're having conversations with people, I think we could get to the bottom of this stuff a lot faster than if we try and tell them all the things to counter all of their, excuses or what have you. I think we should really
Yeah, I agree. It's not an information problem, really. I mean, it does always perplex me because even though I would like to think that vegans, the reason we became vegan or trying to stop exploiting animals in our lives, I mean, going vegan is just kind of shorthand for a longer concept. I mean, I'd love to think it's because we're better people, but we all kind of know that there are many, many very, very fine people who don't seem to get it, do wonderful things. And it does continue to mystify me a bit. I mean, I wonder why are you vegan and another wonderful person is not?
I think a lot of it, when people come to me and say, thank you so much, I'm vegan because of you or your podcast or whatever. And I said, my work is only as good as the people who are open to it. So when we shut ourselves off from, the information, but also just, I think we're really shutting ourselves off more than from the information, but from our own hearts, right? That's why people literally have to go, don't show me, I don't want to look. Like they're cutting themselves off literally from, right? And all the excuses we have to tell ourselves are literally cutting ourselves off from this fierce compassion that we have. So I agree. Like, I know that we want people to manifest their compassion, but I think we just really underestimate how socially wired we are.
Yeah.
How few
I agree.
want to be the one who's standing out. We, again, personality wise, and I do think there's more work needs to be done on kind of how personality traits do play a role in these changes, these transformations. So a lot of us have no problem with that. I grew up, I had no problem being the outlier.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's an important factor.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny. I kind of forgot all about this for some reason, but you just said you grew up, you said New Jersey, and I was like, oh, right, we're both from Edison, New Jersey. I forgot. We were from like the same, like exact neighborhood. I mean, briefly, and I think we didn't overlap because you moved when you were really, really little, right?
I was there from 2 to 10.
Okay. And then I was in another part of Edison and then moved to North Edison, which is where you were. Probably I moved there in like 87 or something.
Right. I would have, no, I would have moved. I would have left by 80.
Yeah, right. So we didn't overlap.
Ladies, the rest of us are here too.
No. This is important information for everyone. Because I mean, it's Edison, New Jersey. It's so random that Colleen and I are both from there. So is Susan Sarandon. Okay, I'll move on. How do you feel about organized religion, Colleen? Like, do you think it's time that it should step up to the plate regarding animals or the environment? Or is it just like, am I thinking about this wrong? Like, is it just a different universe of thought?
Yeah, I think it comes down to, I mean, when you ask that question, is it the leadership in the organized religions or is it the, constituents? And in the end, we're each all responsible for our own decisions. I do think, look, individuals who are in positions of power, as we know, have great impact and influence. So, especially when it comes to, I'm thinking, Roman Catholicism, for instance. But Pope Francis, who's in there right now, I mean, he chose that name because of his admiration for St. Francis, who I literally have this print someone gave to me many, many years ago, because it has St. Francis, who I love, has looking out over Umbria in Italy, which I love. So I have this on my desk because, yeah, I've always been drawn to him. I mean, I grew up Catholic, but I'm encouraged by that. I'm encouraged by, what he has said and what he's done. But there's just limitations, and we have to keep our own expectations in check when we think about these massive, massive, centuries old structures that have their own agenda. It's just different than our agenda. And so I don't have any expectations of anyone in leadership, for instance, but I think the opportunity, because so many millions of people are Catholic or Christian, I should just say Christian, and other, religions as well. So many millions of people are, and the message in most of these religions are compassion. It's like the basic message for most of them. So the opportunity to connect with people on that principle, it's huge. Like we have so much opportunity to do that because that's something they already believe.
Yeah, I grew up as a Reformed Jew, and it's funny because I went on past my bat mitzvah to like rabbi study, and that's where I learned how to think critically. And that's where I think the roots of what later became my animal activism started, because we would have very complex discussions about, euthanasia for humans, things like that. And so I often look back at that fondly, very fondly. I'm giving a talk on Sunday at the Unitarian Universalist Church here, and the reverend who wrote to me said, by the way, a lot of our congregation is vegan. There's also a lot who won't be. So I don't feel like I'm just going to be preaching to the choir. But, that's nice. It's nice that there are these places for connection. It's nice that there are these places for kind of exploring our ethical beliefs and how to reach them. It's nice that there are communities, both religious and non-religious, that are already kind of thinking the same way we are. It's nice to have opportunities to reach others. And on the flip side, these are also places where I can check my ego at the door, hopefully, come in with some humility and learn about new issues too. I mean, that to me is an important part of everything we're talking about. Like, it's not like we all found the light and have become these perfect people. What is your relationship with humility and openness to growing?
Yeah. Do you know that I started my activism really was started in the Unitarian Universalist Church?
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah. So when we moved here to Oakland, to California in 1998, I was looking for a community, and I was not vegan yet, but I was vegetarian and I was an animal advocate, and I was looking for community. And so I found the Unitarian Universalist Church in Oakland. The ministers at the time were very oriented toward the whole church is oriented towards justice. So that was obviously appealing, but it was, they were oriented to music and poetry. And that was something that really appealed to David and I. So that's where I started, and I became vegan while I was at that church. And that's where I started. That's where I started tabling during coffee hour. That's where I started being a youth leader. And so I was taking the kids up to Farm Sanctuary. That's where I started teaching the cooking classes. That's where during the summers where the services were lay led. So the ministers would go on sabbatical and they would invite, the congregation, anybody who wanted to kind of go through the process to actually lead a service. And I led a service on animals and compassion. And that would have been in like 2000. And so it was really wonderful because it really is a captive audience and they already have the principles of caring about justice and caring about, compassion. So I have very fond memories of that, the origins of my activism, which a lot of people don't know. I didn't stay with the church. There were reasons I didn't, but yeah, it was really wonderful. So being able to reach people, especially in these, I think in any kind of religious setting, I think is I think it's not utilized enough. I think we need to tap into that more.
In addition to the principles that you learn in religions, or at least some religions, I grew up Catholic as well, and there was, some pluses and minuses there.
We didn't have the critical thinking as much that the Jews had.
Reform.
But a lot of it is about the story. I mean, this, all religions have the story, the origin story, or the themes, the stories of the saints in Catholicism. So a story and a series of stories. And I feel like none of the stories work anymore. Do you think, is one of your goals in the book to kind of help people find a new story about what life on Earth is about?
No, I don't think a new story needs to be told. I would love them to find a story that is authentic for them. I think that if more people kind of really examined what they care about, they would be able to craft a story that I think would lead them in the direction that we're talking about, which is to uncover that muck and uncover that remove the muck and uncover that compassion. Yeah. And I do think the stories resonate. I mean, they're, depending on what you believe and, however you were raised and whatever religion you're drawn to or stories you're drawn to. I mean, that's what I loved about growing up Catholic. When I went through I really did go through my own kind of recovery around, Catholicism because I had my own experiences there. I mean, I went to Catholic school. Like it was, my father was like best friends with the nuns. Like that just is annoying, right? But my mother was Protestant. And so I had a lot of questions that weren't being answered in the Catholic Church. And when I remember consciously unpacking, I had a desire to not feel resentful about my upbringing. Like I didn't want to look back and be judgmental. I wanted to really find things that I appreciated because again, it shaped me, right? How can I hate the thing that was shaping me? So I remember one of the things I identified, I love the smell of incense. I love still walking into a Catholic church and smelling the incense.
Oh my God, I love the
I
smell of
do
it.
too.
And there's no other incense that smells like it.
No,
I agree.
no. I love the smell of incense. And one of the things I loved were the stories. It's one of the things I love about Easter time. I mean, I just remember you'd go through, for those who don't know, I mean, the Stations of the Cross, that's basically the story of Jesus's life. And someone who's just always drawn to narrative, it really resonated with me. And so it still does. So I think there's stories we can take from that to craft our story, but we just have to, kind of have enough self-awareness and desire to do it.
You went to the Catholic school that had the good carnivals on McKinley Avenue, didn't you?
Oh my God, I can't believe we did have carnivals.
Yeah, there were really good carnivals.
Ladies.
I know, I'm sorry. It's fascinating though. Okay, Colleen, I think it's really funny that we haven't really talked too much about what's in the book, but I also think this is sort of, to some extent, like it's at least the ethos behind the book. And so I want to tell everyone that they need to get A Year of Compassion, 52 Weeks of Living Zero Waste, Plant-Based and Cruelty-Free, because I've learned a lot in it. And I think I know a lot about this stuff. So it's for everyone. I think it's also a really great gift. I want to just touch on the environment for a moment, because that's certainly something that has shifted in the cultural zeitgeist in the time that we've both been on the air, in the time that you certainly since the year 2000 when you did that workshop at the UU Church, there's so much controversy in the zeitgeist, especially around the environmental and climate crises, as to whether individual action is useful or is called for in the face of these enormous global problems, when each person's individual contribution is so minute, right, compared to the whole. So I assume you say aloud no in a compassionate way to that. Tell me about that and how it relates to a year of compassion.
Yeah, let me give you one example that if it's the only takeaway that people have from this conversation, that would be fantastic. If not you, but if one does not think we don't have an impact and can't make a difference, tell that to the pollinators. I mean, literally, we can all put in our gardens, on our balconies, in our yards, wherever we are, work with local, parks to plant native pollinating flowers. And you will see the difference, because those bees, those butterflies, those beetles, those flies, those wasps, those bats, they will find those flowers and they will pollinate them. They will pollinate, right? So that is one example. Like, we do have a crisis around the loss of habitat, pesticides and herbicides, worldwide. And that's why we're seeing a decline in bee populations, especially the native bees, because, the answer is not honey for not the reason that we would say, but honeybees are not native to the United States. They're a domesticated animal. They are literally considered livestock. And they're not the problem. They have plenty.
This is so weird. We literally just talked about this, I think, on the podcast that came out today. Like, so many people don't realize it. It's so funny.
Oh, I love that. I'm so glad you're talking about that. Yeah, it's a real problem. And so the native bees are being pushed out because they're losing their habitat, because we're planting ornamental flowers. We're not planting the native flowers that these animals co-evolved with. And because because honeybees are basically generalist pollinators, so they can go to any flower, anywhere, anytime, and they're getting all of the good stuff, and the native bees are being pushed out. We cannot sustain, it won't sustain that way. We have to plant the flowers that the native bees want to pollinate. And so that is something we could do, all of us. If everybody, wherever they lived, planted, whatever, everyone can plant goldenrod. Everyone can plant, something, because goldenrod is mostly native. We're really everywhere. So yeah, so to me, like, that's just a perfect example, because you will actually also not just have the trust that the impact you made was positive. You will see the impact. You will see the bees. You will see the flowers. You will see them grow. So that's just one example of, I think we underestimate that power we have. And I know that it doesn't mean it's not doing the things that are all systemic, and also the legislation and all of the things that we also need on the larger scale. But if we only do that, then we're really missing all the opportunities we can do on our own individual scale. So if all of us did those individual things that are in the book, oh my God, we would get to the solutions so much faster.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Rewilding is one of the things that, I mean, I don't want to speak for you, Mariann, but I think rewilding is like kind of what gives us the most hope, because it's so radically not human centric. Like, even if we're all destroyed in one fell swoop, as I like to say, then there will be rats and roaches and butterflies for sure, and little birds. I mean, and just to think that this thing that you're planting is going to far surpass our survival, and yet it's going to continue to help.
And with rewilding, like, to some extent, you don't even have to plant things. You just have to kind of leave them alone and they will come. I mean, you do have to weed out some of the worst of the especially in North America. I don't think so much in Europe, because, we're a colonized continent. So there are more invasive things that probably have to be yanked out. But most of all, nature will do a lot of the work for you.
It's so true. It's funny you're even saying this, because it's really the focus of my attention right now is rewilding. And it's so funny you're saying this, because I just planted the seed with my listeners in the podcast that went live today.
So to speak.
Exactly. No pun intended. And it is about, I'm focused so completely on rewilding right now. And literally I'm talking about how this is a whole restoration project here at the house we're in. And, I have been spending hours and hours and hours and hours every day pulling by the root all of the non-native invasives, most of the ones we would call weeds. But what's been really fun is identifying using, picture this is my favorite app for this, identifying them. So I now know the names of the ones that are invasive and that are non-native. And I know the ones that I would have pulled in the past because they looked like weeds.
Yeah.
And I know the ones that are actually native and
Yeah.
that actually flower. And so I've left those. And now that spring is here, I am seeing, I find great satisfaction in pulling all of the non-natives. I find so much
Compassion,
satisfaction.
Colleen, compassion.
Love it. I love I'm going to kill some English ivy today.
Oh shit.
And I'm
Yeah, I've got a lot of English ivy as well. But isn't there so much pleasure in, well, maybe this is probably not true of you. You've probably always been good at this, but I didn't think I would learn which ones were which. And as soon as you learn them, like the plant that you want to cultivate, or even the non-native that you don't, like all of a sudden I recognize them all immediately.
Oh,
It's
really?
like I almost think that we have an inbuilt talent for recognizing plants, because for like a million years our survival depended on recognizing what we could eat and what we couldn't. And it just I never thought I would be able to do that. They all just look like green leaves to me, and now I can tell them apart.
I love it. We have to talk more, Mariann. That's I love it.
We
Yep,
probably have different ones though, because we're in very different parts of the country.
for sure. For sure.
I love that.
I love it. Yeah. So I'm excited by that. And that's something everybody can do. And, I'm aware that not everybody has property or land or garden or whatever, but just if you have any kind of outdoor space, but there's also friends of local parks all over the place. Like, I am really, really encouraging people to look down at their feet. Like, look down, write to the legislators, do your federal thing, but there's only so much you're going to be able to impact at that level. Look down at your feet, look around you, and look what you can do right in your own backyard.
I love that. We have to close up soon, but I want to touch on a year of compassion first, because, well, I feel like you have been talking a lot about the book since, would you say, or do you feel like we've just taken you on multiple journeys that have nothing to do with, because this is like a manifestation of where you currently are right now. And I think it's really encouraging people to tap into their own compassion in a new way or in a broader way. Would you agree with that? Am I stretching here?
No, I think that's exactly the hope. And I know that there's going to be some things that are familiar to you already. So I know that someone who already feels like you're doing all the things, I can promise you there's probably something in that book that is different than the way you've thought of it before. And
I completely agree. I had an apple before. This is such a vegan sentence that I'm about to say. I had an apple before and I was hurrying, I was running, and I was like, I don't remember if I'm supposed to compost the core, or my wife will be mad because we'll get an apple tree. And so I was like, what do I do with it? I have to leave. And I'm sitting there with the core. And so I threw it out. And for like the next 2-3 hours, I was like, I shouldn't have thrown out the apple core.
Oh my God, you threw it out? When the worst thing that could have happened is you would have gotten an apple tree?
I think that listen, I am willing to bet you that she took it out of the garbage and put it in the compost. I'm willing to bet $1 billion. So yeah, I get, silly example, but I do think that there's always something new. And you must have learned new things while researching this and kind of putting all of your thoughts in order. So tell us just a little bit about some of the advice that you have in the book. And a lot of it is to correct misconceptions, right?
well, that example you gave, I try to whittle the stuff down so that the reason you're making the decision you're making is for a larger, for a deeper and larger cause, right? So the whole Apple idea is one of the things I talk about is waste. That waste is only like that apple core only becomes waste until we stop taking responsibility for it. That's what, for me, zero waste is about, also a shortcut for value and use and responsibility. So it's not about becoming some minimalist in this, consumer world. It is about saying, like, what I bring into my life, can I take responsibility for that? Will I use it? Will I value it? Is there a warranty on it so that I can actually value it, and that the company values it enough to say that we trust it and that we'll replace it or fix it if, something goes wrong? How can I discard it? If I bring this into my life, can I responsibly discard this product, right? So waste is only waste when we stop taking responsibility for a thing. I love that concept. That was something that I learned when I was going on my zero waste journey back in 2018. So this is all like what you see in there. It's really how I aspire to live my life. I get more excited about giving things away on Buy Nothing and Free Cycle. We just continue, David and I just continue to go, that's sitting there. We don't need it. We don't use it. Someone else can value it. Let's get into someone else's hands. It is so empowering to do that. It is so satisfying to do that. I just culled a lot of my books recently, and I didn't have, I could have brought them to the library, but I put them on Buy Nothing. I didn't have the bandwidth to separate them out. And I'm like, winner takes all. I'm not separating this book. Well, a woman picked them all up. There were boxes and boxes, and she has separated them out into categories. And now she's giving them away very consciously on Buy Nothing. So yeah, there's just so many things that are exciting and fun. And you'll be like me. You'll just not have time to get sad because you just have to go, discard your apple properly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm obsessed with the Buy Nothing group here, by the way, completely. Both with the giving and the receiving. It's just a wonderful, wonderful tool. I know it's all over the United States. If some of our international flock members could tell us if it's international or not, but it's amazing. I can't recommend it enough. Colleen, what are the biggest, just sort of as we start to close here, what are the biggest misconceptions that people have that get in their way in living their lives in accordance with their beliefs?
Well, I mean, when you ask that, the first thing that comes to mind is I've said before for, decades that most people do nothing when they think they have to do everything. And so the idea that someone says, I would stop eating beef, but I really love chicken. And I ask, or what are you eating now? And they said, everything. And my answer is, why don't you just at least stop eating beef? I'm not advocating eating the chicken, but the idea that we do nothing when we could do something doesn't make any sense. It's self-defeatist and it's just nonsensical. So start where you are, just do something, literally anything you do that's different than what you were doing, anything that you say you can do, start there. And, one of the chapters in the book is eat less meat. I mean, the best thing we can do is to stop eating animals and animal products altogether, right? But we know that not everyone is going to do that. And so at least start with somewhere, something, some product, whatever. Another chapter in the book is take a 30-day vegan challenge, right? So I'm trying to meet people where they're at, but that's what I would say to anybody is just don't do nothing because you can't do everything. Do something, anything.
I love it. I love that so much. The book is A Year of Compassion, 52 Weeks of Living Zero Waste, Plant-Based and Cruelty-Free. I would definitely get more than one copy if you're listening to this right now and you're going to order it, because this is a really great gift. And, we've got Mother's Day coming up. I think this would be a lovely gift for Mother's Day, or just like hold it in your car until someone, needs a little bit of inspo. Colleen, tell our listeners, and I'm sure they already know this, but tell our listeners how they can find you online, support your efforts, get this book, all of the things.
Thanks, Jasmin. Yeah, I mean, my website is joyfulvegan.com and there's links to everything from there. I really, really want to encourage everyone to go subscribe to my Substack. It's where I'm putting a ton of energy and writing. It's been a really lovely experience to find a really good platform for my writing. And so you can find from there, the menu has my books listed at the menu item is books. And it has links to all the different ways you can get the book. So people can get signed copies as well. I'm working with a local bookstore so that they can fulfill the books. You can get them from wherever you want. And please review the book. That really does make a difference. It really is helpful. Even if you leave a review at a place that you don't want to shop at, just still leave the review there because other people are shopping there.
I totally agree. I personally don't use Amazon, but as an author, I can say the Amazon reviews are really important. So I couldn't not agree more. I hope you'll stick on for a few minutes for a Q&A with our flock who's here live, and I know they're really excited. Colleen Patrick-Goudreau, you're such a joy. It's a perfect word to describe you, and I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed this chat and how grateful I am, how grateful we all are, not just those of us here in this digital room right now, but all the people who care about animals and who want to make the world a better place and who are on our own journey of self-awareness. You have been such a bright light for so many of us. So thank you for doing the work you do. We love you.
Thank you, Colleen.
Thank you. Ditto. Right back at you.